1. The shocking admission and the passport problem, 72%. Say that number out loud. 72%. That is the stunning majority of Americans who, in recent highly publicized surveys, have openly admitted they feel they are perceived more negatively when they travel abroad. Think about the profound implications of that single statistic. For every 3 people you see lining up to board a plane at a busy hub like JFK, LAX, or O'Hare, 2 of them are harboring a deep-seated feeling that they are unwelcomed. Their presence is met with suspicion, judgment, or outright disdain, sometimes before their plane even touches down. This isn't just a trivial observation about fleeting tourist moods. It's a profound, tectonic shift in global perception. The blue passport once held a special, almost magical currency. For decades following World War II, it was the closest thing to a golden ticket, a universal symbol of effortless mobility and acceptance. It was a document that seemed to bypass lines and open doors, a reflection of America's post-war economic dominance and the powerful reach of its cultural soft power. Traveling with a U.S. passport meant you were, for better or worse, the center of the travel world. But now, for millions, that feeling of unquestioned welcome has evaporated. The symbol of freedom has, for many, become an object of international suspicion. It often feels less like a golden ticket and more like an expired membership card that flashes an error when scanned, causing the person holding it to hesitate and brace for scrutiny. You see the evidence everywhere. It's in the viral shaming on social media, where clips of loud, demanding tourists become instantaneous global fodder. It's in the continuous stream of anecdotes circulating on Reddit and TikTok stories of entering European bars and hearing the distinct, cold whisper, "Here comes the American." It's in the curious, often judgmental glances that follow an English conversation in a crowded Italian piazza or a Japanese train. The image of the American tourist is undeniably masquerading in the eyes of the international community and, critically, in the eyes of Americans themselves. So, the fundamental question we must confront is this: what happened? When did the symbol of freedom become a signal for caution? And is this growing international friction simply a rejection of a few insensitive behaviors? Or is it a deeper, more systemic indictment of how we as a nation present ourselves to the world? To answer this, we need to dissect this phenomenon through 3 distinct, overlapping lenses. First, the perception problem. Why the world is reacting so strongly to our behavior. Second, the policy problem. Why travel has become bureaucratically harder for Americans. And finally, the price problem. Why we're increasingly seen as economic invaders, displacing locals instead of enriching their lives. More importantly, we'll ask, is this the definitive end of the American travel dream? Or is it simply a necessary, painful wake-up call about how we behave as guests and hosts in a rapidly changing world? Let's start with the behavior that lit the fuse. 2. The viral stereotype anatomy of the ugly American. The initial friction, the surface layer of this whole dynamic, is the easiest to identify. The enduring and now globally amplified ugly American stereotype. While this trope is decades-old, coined, perhaps as far back as the 1950s, social media has weaponized it, transforming isolated incidents into undeniable collective evidence that is shared globally within minutes. We've all seen the viral examples that feed this narrative. The parent urging their child to clamber onto the 1,000-year-old stones at Stonehenge for a quick, irreverent photo op. The tourist in a small French town who, upon seeing local actors dressed as medieval reenactors, actually asked if they were Syrian refugees. Or, perhaps the most illustrative, the guy in Cornwall, England, looking out over the legendary landscape associated with King Arthur, who, completely missing the cultural significance, shouted with pure, unfiltered frustration, "Where's the goddamn castle? I want to see a castle." These stories are shared faster than cheap transatlantic flight deals, and with every resharing, they reinforce a single, toxic image. The American tourist is loud, demanding, lacking in historical tact, and fundamentally believes they are the center of the universe. However, the real core of the problem goes beyond simple volume or manners. It stems from a profound, often unconscious, expectation of American standards. We arrive abroad with an unspoken belief that the world should operate for our convenience and our comfort. A deeply ingrained habit from a lifetime of being part of a dominant culture. Consider the expectations we carry. We expect everyone to speak English, and frequently we don't bother to learn even the most basic local phrases. Our frustration immediately surfaces, often loudly, when the waiter in Milan or the train conductor in Frankfurt does on to instantly grasp our complicated, quickly delivered requests. We expect seamless modern convenience, demanding to swipe a credit card at a small cash-only market stall in a rural corner of Portugal, viewing their lack of high-tech payment options as backwardness rather than a cultural choice or economic reality. Most jarringly, we treat local cuisine as a suggestion, not a tradition. We ask for the local dish to be less spicy or to add cheese to make it palatable, a small action that, to a chef who has perfected a recipe over generations, is a casual, disrespectful dismissal of their culture and heritage. It's the culinary equivalent of shouting, "Where's the castle?" These are not typically acts of malice. They are acts of unconscious entitlement, rooted in a lifetime of cultural hegemony, where adaptation was rarely required. But when one of these small actions is captured and circulated, a child laughed at for speaking too loudly in a quiet Parisian park. A mother confused when a waiter pretends not to understand a demanding request immediately becomes collective evidence of a global prejudice. The middle-class family that saves up for years for a summer vacation in France finds themselves feeling examined under a microscope from the moment they land their supposed relaxing trip, turning into a constant test of patience and the ability to keep their voice down. The businessman from Ohio walking into a bar in Berlin hears that chilling whisper before he can even order a beer. Here comes the American. In that single, self-conscious moment, he is no longer just a tourist. He becomes a symbol, a lightning rod for a global, deep-seated prejudice born from amplified viral misbehavior. This bitter role reversal, from being envied for the strong dollar to being mocked for shouting louder than a radio, is the first and most immediate crisis facing the American traveler today. 3. The bureaucratic barrier, the fading VIP status. The feeling of being unwelcome is now being codified by global government policy. This friction is no longer just about social behavior. It's about bureaucracy, a powerful shift that is ending the era of effortless US travel. To understand the change, we must first indulge in a bit of nostalgia for the passport stamp. Remember the feeling? You'd hand over your passport. The customs agent would flip through it, thump down the stamp clack, and you were welcomed. That worn-out ink was a symbol of welcome and adventure. Today, that physical stamp is increasingly being replaced by digital entry records, biometric scanners, and mandatory pre-travel applications. This is the advent of the digital border. The contrast is stark. The old system was a quick wave through based on trust. The new reality is mandatory biometric scans, data collection, and financial requirements. The most prominent example of this is happening in Europe, with the implementation of the Entry-Exit System ETIAS and the European Travel Information and Authorization System ETIAS. The EES is a large-scale IT system designed to register travelers from non-EU countries every time they cross an external border. It takes fingerprints and a facial image every time. The ETIAS, on the other hand, is a mandatory pre-registration system. It requires Americans to apply online before traveling to the Schengen area, pay a fee, and be screened. This isn't a visa, but a travel authorization that assesses security risk before you even purchase a ticket. Crucially, this isn't just an isolated European policy, it's part of a global trend. The UK now requires an ETA electronic travel authorization, and Brazil has recently reintroduced an e-visa requirement for US citizens. Governments are tightening control, generating revenue, and collecting data on all visitors. This is a global policy trend towards tighter governmental control and a clear message. Access is no longer a given, it is conditional. Why do Americans feel it most acutely? Because they were, statistically, among the last to be subjected to these stringent rules. We grew up accustomed to unfettered access based on the simple color of our passport. When the whole world begins to build regulatory walls, the most privileged traveler, the one used to sailing over them, is the first to notice the sudden difficulty. Consider the Ohio couple planning that milestone 30th wedding anniversary trip to Paris. In the old days, they needed a plane ticket and a passport. Now, they must navigate the administrative gauntlet, the ETA application, the ETIAS fee, the hours spent verifying biographical data, and the anxiety of standing at a biometric scanner that might or might not recognize them. A cherished romantic memory is suddenly preceded by an administrative test. If the machine doesn't recognize their face, their dream trip can instantly become a paperwork nightmare involving airport officials and extra documentation. The cost is not the real issue. A $7 ETIAS fee is negligible. The problem lies in the psychological impact. It's the powerful feeling of being pulled down from the global VIP guest seat to the level of standard applicant. We are now asked to prove we are worthy of entry, a subtle but significant devaluation of American exceptionalism, and a profound blow to the national self-perception of easy global access. For the price of presence, overtourism and gentrification, the policy walls are hard. The walls of resentment are even harder. The unfriendly eyes on the streets visible. Raw anger in many destination cities constitutes an invisible wall that no scanner, no matter how advanced, can break through. The hostility is real and documented. Amidst the scorching summer heat in Barcelona in 2025, crowds weren't holding beach towels. They were holding water guns and spraying tourists, a visible, non-violent form of protest with a clear message. We are already overloaded. Go home. In Mexico City, the graffiti is more blunt. Gringo. Go home. This street-level anger is no longer a joke. It's a palpable sigh of frustration that has turned into collective fury. The root cause of this anger is not tourist manners. It's economics. It's about the wallet and the roof. The tourist is seen not as a source of revenue, but as a source of economic displacement. Let's look at the heart of overtourism in Europe, using cities like Barcelona and Venice. For years, tens of thousands of apartments in Barcelona's historic center have been converted into short-term Airbnbs. This practice, driven by high tourist demand, has decimated the local housing market, driving up rental prices by sometimes over 50% in the most popular districts. Locals, teachers, police, nurses, and multi-generational families forced into the suburbs because they can no longer afford to live where they work. They see a smiling tourist dragging a suitcase and they don't see revenue. They see the direct reason their neighbor was evicted and their community fabric is fraying. The problem is even more complex in the Americas, where the focus is on gentrification by digital nomads and expats. Places like Mexico City and Lisbon have seen a massive influx of remote workers, many from the US and Canada. These individuals, earning US salaries paid in dollars, can easily outbid locals for rent, often willing to pay double or triple the average price for a nicer apartment. This influx fundamentally alters neighborhood demographics and the cost of living for everyone. The rise of the American digital nomad has become a primary driver of the housing crisis in many international cities. To the local working class, the tourist or the new expat is not a new friend. They are the symbol of the economic invasion that stole their old home. The response has been severe. In Kyoto, Japan, authorities have had to put up explicit signs and impose steep 10,000 yen fines to prohibit tourists from entering alleys around the geisha districts. Why? Because tourists were pushing, shoving, and sticking cameras into the faces of the locals, showing a profound lack of respect. This shows that culture, once an attraction, now needs to be fenced off and protected from the very people who claim to appreciate it. The problem, in the end, isn't the language barrier Google Translate is constantly improving. The problem is the feeling barrier. Locals feel that visitors, especially Americans, bring a whirlwind of soaring rents, noise, and disruption. And their presence is causing more harm to the community's rhythm of life than their dollars can compensate for. 5. The economic rebound effect, America's empty seats, the problem. However, doesn't stop at the water guns in Barcelona. The global resentment and the new bureaucratic barriers are now having a painful economic rebound effect right here in the United States. The numbers are speaking volumes. Current projections for 2025 indicate that the number of international visitors to the US will decrease by nearly 9%. This sounds abstract, but put it into perspective. If the US were a massive football stadium with 100,000 seats, nearly 10,000 would sit empty this year. We are losing the away game, the foreign visitors who once flocked here, and the former home team advantage is gone. The most painful blow is coming from our closest neighbor. In just a few months, the number of Canadian visitors crossing the border by car has decreased by a stunning 28%. That means for every 4 cars that used to come down from Canada, 1 is now staying home. Why? It's not because gas is expensive or the roads are bad. It's because they no longer see a compelling reason to come here and spend their money. They perceive the US as expensive, unfriendly at the border, and increasingly unwelcoming. This exodus doesn't stop at individual tourists. International conferences, exhibitions, and major industry conventions that bring in billions of dollars, the easy foreign capital are shifting to cities like Toronto, Berlin, Amsterdam, and Vancouver. Rival cities are cheering with delight as the economic pie that was once exclusively America's suddenly falls into their hands. This shift is driven by 2 critical, overlapping words: trust and value. The global traveler operates on choice. Travel is a luxury, a discretionary expense like dessert. If the quality is poor, if the price is too high, or if the service is delivered with cold indifference, the consumer simply chooses another restaurant. When tourists feel they've been pickpocketed, treated coldly, or nickel-and-dimed at every turn, they won't return. Worse, they will actively tell that negative story to the whole world, creating an unstoppable wave of negative word of mouth. Marketing for the US, the long-term cost of a poor reputation is far greater than any short-term profit. The powerful analogy is unavoidable. America, once proudly called the global Disneyland, now risks looking like an abandoned amusement park. The tickets are double the price, the roller coasters are often out of service, and customers don't even bother to come anymore. This economic spiral is a severe blow, hitting not only the nation's balance sheet, but its pride. 6. The tip-dependent crisis. Pain for the average worker. The economic pain is real, and the ultimate victim is not the government or the giant international travel corporations. It is the average American worker, the local waiter, the taxi driver, the souvenir shop owner, and the hotel staff. The scope of this damage is terrifying. We are talking about tens of thousands of jobs disappearing in a short time. Imagine an entire football stadium packed to the rafters, every single seat representing a family that has lost its income, its financial stability, and its sense of certainty. Each cheer has been replaced by a worried sigh about rent, electricity bills, or simply tomorrow's dinner. The cause lies in a fundamental, yet ridiculously fragile, model of the U.S. service economy, the tip-dependent wage system. In many states, the base wage for servers is only half the federal minimum wage, built on the assumption that customer tips will reliably make up the difference. But when tourists are scarce, or when they're angry about a high-priced bottle of water in a Vegas casino, they tip less or not at all. Immediately, this cuts into the primary source of income for millions of frontline workers. Consider the story of the old taxi driver in Florida. For decades, he lived comfortably thanks to the reliable influx of Canadian tourists every winter season. But this year, with Canadian vehicle crossings down nearly 30%, his back seat is consistently empty. The meter is stationary. In the end, he was forced to sell the only asset he had left of his profession, his cab, just to pay off his bank debts and make ends meet. This is not some far-off news story. These are devastating financial realities happening right in the neighborhood next door. Perhaps the most poignant example is the boutique hotel and restaurant in New Orleans. After over 50 years in business, the owner was forced to close. His words are a painful epitaph for the industry. It's cheaper to turn off the lights than to open without customers. That phrase encapsulates the entire crisis. The fire was still burning on the summer BBQ. The smoke was still rising, but the table was empty. And those left to suffer are the American servers, drivers, and hotel staff who just need a steady stream of customers to survive. This is more than just an economic downturn. It's a direct blow to national pride. A country once proud to be the #1 destination now witnesses shops closing, hotels standing empty, and an entire generation of workers falling into uncertainty. The decline of American tourism is not an abstract statistical problem. It's a very personal, very painful reality unfolding on once bustling streets. 7. A blueprint for change. How to regain goodwill. The news has been difficult, but this crisis is an opportunity. It is a crossroads, and we have the power to rewrite the narrative. It's never too late to change the image of the American traveler. The solution lies in a profound mindset shift for every holder of the blue passport. The first step is adopting a new passport contract. Learn to be a good guest. The power of small actions is immense. The first, easiest step is mastering the power of 5 simple words in the local language: hello, please, thank you, excuse me, and the bill. A small smile and a simple grazie or dankeschön instantly changes the expression on a local's face. Respecting the culture costs nothing, but immediately returns a richer, more open travel experience. Second, we must avoid the entitlement trap by embracing cultural submission. Stop demanding changes to local food: no extra cheese, no requests for less spice. Understand that cuisine is a form of cultural expression, and you are there to taste their world, not bring yours. Similarly, practice the rule of volume. If the locals around you in the cafe or train car are speaking softly, you should be too. Be a listener, not a performer. The world is not Disneyland, and we are not VIP guests everywhere we go. Third, we must spend wisely to create goodwill. Stop instinctively putting all your money into large international chains or obvious tourist traps. Make the conscious choice to patronize the local economy. Buy from small convenience stores, eat at family-owned restaurants, and hire independent local guides. This is a clear, powerful message to the community. I'm here to support your way of life, not just to consume it. Finally, think of travel as a dialogue. We bring the American story to the world, but we must also make ourselves open to listening to theirs. When you converse openly, when you show curiosity instead of judgment, you are not only more welcome, but you also rediscover the true spirit of travel: learning, connecting, and opening your heart. We cannot control global visa policies or international rent prices, but we absolutely control how we enter another country. This is the key we still hold. A small act of genuine courtesy is often enough to break down a big, invisible wall. 8. Conclusion and call to action. We have followed the entire path of the fracturing American travel dream, from the initial shocking admission that 72% of us feel unwelcome, to the rise of invisible policy walls like the ETIAS system, to the profound pain of local resentment over gentrification, and finally, to the desolate financial reality for American workers at home. The blue passport is at a definitive crossroads. It no longer grants automatic, unquestioned entry. Travel has become a test of our character, a test of our humility, and a test of our willingness to adapt to a multipolar world. The ultimate paradox is this: the world isn't building brick walls around us, it's building bureaucratic, economic, and emotional walls. It is the ETA procedure, the Gringo go-home banner, the cold stare in the Berlin bar, and the self-doubt we feel standing at the customs counter. This is not the end of the world, but it is an urgent, sobering prospect. An America that was once the undisputed global Disneyland now risks sitting on the sidelines. watching its competitors roll out the red carpet while we struggle to prove we're worthy of basic entry. The choice is ours. Will we retreat into isolation, complaining that the world doesn't play by our rules? Or will we embrace this moment as a profound catalyst for change? Every American who chooses respect, who learns a few local phrases, and who spends their money wisely is a cultural ambassador, actively working to prove that the ugly American is not the only American. The opportunity is not to travel without friction, but to travel with respect and honor. The question is, what will you choose to do the next time you step out into the world?